The language of emotion. Mastering the art of reading people. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and known, without a word, that something was wrong? Or walked into a room and felt the tension before anyone said a thing? We all sense these unspoken messages, yet most of us were never taught how to understand them. In a world overflowing with noise, it's the silent signals, tone, body language, hesitation that carry the real truth. And not just from others, from ourselves too. This book isn't just about reading people, it's about reading yourself. I didn't set out to write a book about emotions. I set out to understand why we struggle to say what we feel, why we ignore our instincts, why we sometimes smile when we're falling apart, why we miss the signs in others because we've learned to tune out our own. Over time, I realized that emotional intelligence isn't about controlling emotions or decoding everyone around you like a detective. It's about fluency. Fluency in the language of emotion so you can recognize it, name it, and respond to it, starting within your own mind. This book is your guide to that fluency. You'll learn how to read people not by guessing, but by noticing. You'll learn how emotions live in the body, how they reveal themselves in breath, voice, posture, and silence. You'll discover how to listen to others with more clarity and to yourself with more compassion. Because before you can read anyone else, you have to be able to read the one person you carry with you every second of your life, yourself. By the end of this book, you won't just understand people better. You'll understand yourself on a level you've never had language for. And that changes everything. Part 1. Self-awareness, the first language of emotion, root of all connection. Chapter 1. There's a version of you that handles hard conversations without spiraling. That trusts your gut and knows why. That reads the room without overthinking. That speaks up without second-guessing. That can see beneath the surface of someone's words. And stay calm when their actions don't match. That version of you isn't imaginary. It's a skill set. And it starts here. We live in a world where emotions are everywhere, but few people are fluent in them. We suppress them, misread them, get manipulated by them. We're told to be ourselves, but most of us haven't been taught how to know ourselves. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is the ability to recognize, understand, and work with emotion, both yours and other people's. It's not about being soft or emotional. It's about being awake. It's the foundation behind strong leadership, deep empathy, unshakable presence, and healthy relationships. And if we're being honest, it's also your defense against those who use emotional cues to manipulate, mislead, or control. Because while emotional intelligence is often used for connection, it can also be used for control. Dark psychology, the study of how people use influence, deception, and emotional pressure to get what they want, relies on one simple truth. The less emotionally aware you are, the easier you are to read, influence, and steer. The more disconnected you are from your own emotional signals, the more predictable and pliable you become. This book is about reclaiming that power, not to manipulate, but to notice, to trust your instincts, understand your reactions, and recognize emotional dynamics as they're happening. Not just after the damage is done. At its core, emotional intelligence comes down to 5 essential skills. Self-awareness, recognizing your emotions as they arise. Self-regulation, managing your emotional reactions with intention. Motivation, using emotions to drive meaningful action. Empathy, recognizing emotions in others without judgment. Social skills, navigating relationships with awareness and care. Some people develop these early. Most of us don't, but anyone can. Because if you want to connect deeply, lead wisely, protect your energy, and stay emotionally steady in a chaotic world, You have to start by reading yourself. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming fully yourself and learning how to meet the world from that place of inner clarity. Chapter 2: Why we struggle with emotion. We live in a world full of emotion, and yet most of us were never taught how to handle it. From a young age, we're trained to be emotionally selective. Don't cry. Stop being dramatic. Calm down. Be strong. Smile. Some emotions are rewarded, like happiness, politeness, and confidence. Others are punished, like anger, fear, sadness, or vulnerability. So we adapt. We learn to fake smiles, swallow pain, stay quiet when we want to scream. Not because we're weak, but because we're trying to survive socially, to belong, to avoid shame or rejection. And over time, we become strangers to our own emotional reality. The 3 common patterns. There are 3 major ways we learn to deal with emotion, none of them especially healthy. Repression. We shove emotion down and pretend it's not there. This leads to numbness, burnout, or unexpected outbursts when emotions inevitably leak out. Over-identification. We become the emotion. I'm angry becomes a full identity. We lose perspective and get swept away in the current. Avoidance. We distract ourselves endlessly. We stay busy, scroll endlessly, overwork, overeat, or chase temporary highs to avoid sitting with what we feel. The result? We stop trusting ourselves. We confuse triggers with truth. We either explode or shut down. We misread other people or believe we're being misread. And we wonder why connection feels so hard. Why emotional confusion makes us vulnerable. When you don't understand your emotions, it becomes easy for someone else to use them against you. They play on your guilt. They feed your insecurity. They provoke your anger, then call you unstable. They shape your perception before you even know what you feel. This is where emotional intelligence becomes more than just a nice to have. It becomes your armor and your mirror. It protects you and it reveals you. Awareness is the first step. This chapter isn't about blame, it's about awareness. We inherited emotional habits from the people who raised us, the cultures we grew up in, the systems we live in. But we don't have to stay stuck in those patterns. We can choose something better. Emotional intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's about getting honest. It's about noticing what's really going on in you and why. It's about creating just enough space between feeling and action to make a better choice. That space is where your power lives. In the next chapter, we'll begin building that power by learning how to observe emotions not as enemies or rulers, but as messengers. Chapter 3: The journey starts within. You can't read people clearly if you haven't learned to read yourself. You can't connect deeply with others if you're disconnected from your own emotional truth. You can't trust your instincts if you've spent your life ignoring them. This chapter is where the work begins. Not the kind of work that leaves you drained and doubting. The kind that grounds you, clarifies you, reconnects you to the emotional signals that have always been there, just waiting to be heard. Because the journey of emotional intelligence doesn't start with other people. It starts with you, noticing without judgment. The most powerful emotional shift you can make is learning to notice without immediately reacting. Noticing isn't passive, it's active. It requires presence, honesty, curiosity, and patience. It sounds like this. I'm feeling tense. What's underneath that? That conversation left me drained. Why? I keep replaying that moment. What emotion hasn't been acknowledged yet? You don't have to fix the emotion. You don't have to fight it. You just have to get curious. Judgment shuts emotion down. Curiosity opens it up. Emotional clarity over emotional control. A lot of people think emotional intelligence means controlling your feelings. But the goal isn't control, it's clarity. When you have emotional clarity, you're no longer guessing. You're no longer reacting to ghosts from your past or other people's projections. You know what's yours and what's not. You know what's real and what's just old wiring. Emotional clarity gives you options. Do I need to speak up? Do I need to breathe and stay grounded? Do I need to let go or lean in? You can't choose wisely if you're emotionally confused. Clarity always comes first. Start here, a simple practice. Here's how to start building emotional clarity right now. Pause once a day and name what you feel. Not just good or bad. Be specific. Tired? Resentful? Hopeful? Anxious? Curious? Ask yourself, what triggered this? Look gently. A conversation? A memory? A need that isn't being met? Notice where it lives in your body. Tight shoulders? Sinking chest? Racing heart? Emotions don't just live in your head, they live in your nervous system. Take one small, conscious breath, just to create space. Just to remind yourself, I'm not my emotion. I'm the one observing it. That's it. No journaling required. No deep analysis. Just awareness. Repeat it. That's how clarity grows. The mirror before the window. Before you can decode someone's tone. Before you can tell if a smile is genuine or forced. Before you can trust your intuition around others. You need to hold up the mirror. This part of the journey is quiet, private, but it's the most important part of all. Because once you begin to see yourself clearly, everything else becomes easier to read. Chapter 4: Learning to read your emotional signals. Before you can read anyone else, you have to learn to read yourself. This isn't about self-analysis or overthinking. It's about learning the unique language your emotions speak, because they are speaking all the time. Some emotions shout, others whisper, some hit like a wave, others creep in like fog. But every emotion brings a message. And your ability to read those messages, not just feel them, is the foundation of emotional intelligence. So the question becomes, how do your emotions communicate with you? The 3 channels of emotional signals. Emotions don't just show up in one way. They speak across 3 channels. The body, somatic cues. Before you know what you feel, your body already knows. Anxiety might show up as tightness in the chest or jaw. Anger is heat in the face or clenched fists. Shame is a sinking feeling or urge to look away. Joy is lightness or energy in the limbs. Most of us try to think our way into emotional clarity, but the body often tells the truth first. Start by asking, where do I feel this? What's the texture of this feeling? Heavy? Buzzing? Numb? Your body is a map. The more you check in with it, the more precise your emotional compass becomes. The mind, inner dialogue. Your thoughts often reveal what you feel, especially the ones that repeat. They're going to leave. Fear. This always happens to me. Resentment, powerlessness. I should be doing more. Guilt or shame. I've got this. Confidence, calm. The goal isn't to silence your thoughts, it's to listen to them as signals. Start asking, what stories am I telling myself right now? Are these facts or feelings in disguise? Behavior, impulse plus action. Sometimes the clearest emotional signal is what you want to do. The urge to withdraw might be hurt. The need to control everything? Often fear. Snapping at small things? Unmet needs. Reaching out to someone unexpectedly? Connection or even forgiveness. When your actions feel off, ask, what emotion is this behavior trying to express or protect? Practice emotional micro check-ins. Start simple. Once a day, just pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what am I feeling? Try to go beyond good or bad. Where is it in my body? What thoughts or stories are looping with this feeling? What am I wanting to do right now and why? These check-ins take 60 seconds or less, but over time they create emotional fluency, the ability to sense, name, and work with emotion before it turns into confusion or chaos. The goal is not control, it's relationship. You don't need to fix every emotion. You don't need to suppress or analyze them to death. You just need a relationship with them. Emotions don't ask to be obeyed. They ask to be acknowledged. And once you start listening, you'll be amazed at how much easier it becomes to stay present instead of overwhelmed. Chapter 5. Emotional Patterns, Triggers, and Truth. Have you ever reacted more intensely than the situation seemed to call for? Said something you didn't mean? Shut down without knowing why? That's not a weakness. It's an emotional pattern, and we all have them. Before we learn to consciously respond to the world, we unconsciously react to it. Those reactions are shaped by everything we've lived through: childhood dynamics, past relationships, cultural messaging, even trauma. And if we don't recognize those patterns, we end up living them on repeat. Emotional patterns, the scripts beneath the surface. Patterns are like emotional muscle memory. You get criticized, and your body tightens before your mind can even respond. Someone pulls away, and you assume they're abandoning you. You fail at something and immediately feel shame, not curiosity. These patterns aren't random. They were formed to protect you, even if they're no longer useful. Some common ones: people-pleasing, rooted in fear of rejection. Over-control, rooted in fear of chaos or unpredictability. Quick temper, often masking deep vulnerability or hurt. Emotional shutdown, a defense against overwhelm. The pattern becomes the lens you see through, and until you recognize the lens, you won't see clearly. Triggers are teachers. A trigger is any stimulus, external or internal, that activates an emotional reaction bigger than the moment itself. Someone ignores your message and you spiral. You hear a tone of voice and your stomach drops. You get feedback and immediately feel attacked. In those moments, the question isn't, what's wrong with me? It's, what is this reaction trying to show me? Triggers point to unfinished emotional business. They're not always accurate, but they're always informative. When you get triggered, pause. Let yourself feel it before reacting. Name it. I feel dismissed. I feel powerless. Trace it. Ask, when have I felt this before? Separate then from now. Is this current, or is this old pain in a new disguise? This is how you shift from reacting unconsciously to responding intentionally. Emotional truth versus emotional story. Your emotions are real, but they don't always tell the truth about a situation. Emotional truth. I feel abandoned right now. Emotional story. No one ever really cares about me. The emotion is valid, but the story might be outdated, inherited, or false. When you confuse the two, you get stuck. But when you can name the emotion and question the story, you gain freedom. Ask yourself, what's the emotion? What's the story I'm attaching to it? Is that story actually true, or just familiar? This is the work. Learning to recognize emotional patterns and triggers isn't about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself. The goal isn't to stop reacting forever. It's to notice the reaction, understand where it comes from, and decide whether or not to follow it. That's how you stop living on emotional autopilot. That's how you break cycles. Part 2, Beneath the Surface, Reading the Truth in Behavior. Chapter 1, The Behavioral Blueprint of Emotion. No one tells the truth with their mouth. The body, however, always whispers it. In every interaction, a second conversation is taking place. It unfolds in silences, in shifts of posture, in the brief tightening of a jaw, or the flutter of a hand. Most people never notice this conversation. They are caught in the trap of words, believing what is said, trusting what is claimed. But words are the least reliable indicators of truth. Emotion, when it truly lives inside a person, does not ask permission. It leaks. It slips into movements, facial expressions, the pace of breath, the rhythm of speech. It's this language, subtle, raw, unfiltered, that reveals what a person truly feels. To master the art of reading people, you must learn to observe not what is said, but what breaks through despite the saying. Emotion is not a feeling. It's an instruction. We're taught to think of emotions as internal, fleeting moods or states of mind. But this is a surface understanding. In truth, emotion evolved to compel action. The moment you feel something, your body prepares you to do something, to flee, to fight, to connect, to protect, to withdraw. This is why emotional behavior is often faster than conscious thought. A man flinches before he realizes he's afraid. A woman tenses her shoulders before admitting she's upset. These are not conscious performances, they are evolutionary commands leaking into movement. When you observe someone in real time, you're not watching what they want you to see. You're watching a system designed by nature to reveal vulnerability, strength, threat, and desire despite their best efforts to hide it. The inconsistency principle, where truth slips out. Everyone lies, if not to others, then to themselves. And yet, lying is harder than it looks. The experienced deceiver rehearses words, crafts tone, calibrates expression. But they always miss something, a delay, a micro-movement, a mismatch between face and voice. That crack is where truth slips out. You will find that emotional truth hides in inconsistency. The smile that fades too fast. The nod that comes half a second late. The confident tone accompanied by restless hands. These contradictions are not accidents, they are the body revolting against the lie. When you see such dissonance, trust your instincts. You are not imagining it. You are reading the split between intention and emotion, the fracture where the lie fails to fully hold. Masks are built, but they are heavy. From a young age, we learn to mask our feelings. We smile to be liked, laugh to diffuse tension, stay silent to avoid conflict. These masks become automatic. But the cost of wearing a mask is that it requires energy. The longer someone wears one, the more likely they are to slip. Watch closely in moments of stress, distraction, or fatigue. These are the cracks in the armor. A fake smile becomes brittle. A practiced voice drops half an octave. A composed face reveals a flicker of contempt or fear or resentment before returning to its mask. Those flickers? That's where emotional truth lives. They last less than a second. But once you train your eye to catch them, it becomes nearly impossible not to see them. The manipulator's game, weaponizing emotion. Not everyone hides emotion because they're afraid. Some hide it to use it. Skilled manipulators are masters of display. They know how to cry on cue, how to mimic sincerity, how to flash warmth or play victim to control the dynamic of a room. They do not reveal emotion, they simulate it carefully, strategically, convincingly. And yet, no one can keep the performance perfect forever. A manipulator may say the right words, but they will often reveal the wrong reactions. A faint smile at your discomfort. A brief eye roll when they think you aren't watching. A delay in showing empathy because they have to calculate it first. These inconsistencies are not mistakes. They are the shadow of true intent. Learn to see them and you will no longer fall for the performance. Patterns, not moments, reveal the emotional blueprint. A single gesture can lie. A single moment can deceive. But behavior repeated over time reveals who someone truly is. Emotional reading is not about obsessing over a shrug or a blink. It's about noticing what always happens, what this person does when they're nervous, when they're challenged, when they're praised. Their emotional blueprint is written in patterns. Observe. Do they become defensive when questioned? Do they change tone around certain people? Do they dominate the conversation when insecure or go quiet when angry? These patterns are windows. They show you not only what a person feels, but what drives them, what they fear, what they need, and how they protect their ego. Every room is a stage, but not every actor is aware. We perform for each other constantly. But some people are not aware of their performance, and those are the easiest to read. Their behavior is raw, unmanaged, reactive. They leak emotion without realizing it because they don't yet know how to edit themselves. Others are far more controlled. They've learned to curate their image, to tailor emotion for effect. These are harder to read, but also more dangerous because they know how to manipulate perception. In both cases, your role as a reader is the same. Stop listening to what people say they are and start watching for what their body shows they cannot hide. Chapter 2: Microexpressions and Nonverbal Leakage. Emotion always leaves fingerprints, no matter how quickly it's wiped away. The most honest part of any conversation happens in silence. In the spaces between words, before the mouth opens, after the question lands, when the body forgets it's being watched, that's where the truth lives. Not in the language we speak, but in the language we leak. People are liars by nature. Not always maliciously, but instinctively. We lie to protect ourselves, to be liked, to avoid conflict. Most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We say we're happy when we're not. We say we're fine when we're breaking. We say, I agree, when inside we are revolting. And yet, no matter how well-rehearsed the performance, no matter how polished the words, emotion refuses to stay caged. It finds a way out. That escape is often most visible on the face. It happens in flashes. A tightening of the jaw, the brief narrowing of the eyes, a twitch of the mouth that contradicts the smile. These moments last a fraction of a second. They come and go before a person even knows they've betrayed themselves. But for the trained eye, these flashes speak louder than entire speeches. These are micro-expressions, the involuntary, lightning-fast displays of emotion that the body cannot suppress. They are not gestures. They are not habits. They are pure reflex, biological truths that occur before the brain can apply the social filter. You cannot fake them. You cannot rehearse them. And once you know how to spot them, you will see them everywhere. They often appear when emotion and intent are at war. A person feels fear but doesn't want to show weakness. They feel contempt but are trying to be polite. The emotion flashes across the face anyway, as if the subconscious can't help itself, it must be known. These expressions are not dramatic. You won't see someone scowling or sobbing or wide-eyed like a cartoon character. That's where most people go wrong. They expect emotion to announce itself. But the real giveaways are subtle, imperceptible to the untrained, yet unmistakable once you know how to read the code. There is a biological reason these signals are so brief. Emotion travels faster than conscious thought. The part of the brain responsible for emotion, the limbic system, activates before the neocortex, which governs rational control. By the time a person decides to manage their expression, the truth has already escaped. It's like a reflex. You feel a burn and your hand pulls back before you can think. In the same way, the face reacts before the mind can tell it to lie. People try to catch themselves. They recover. They smile quickly. They tilt their head to soften the tension. But the damage is done. A crack appeared. A glimpse of the real emotional state slipped through. And if you saw it, you now hold an advantage they never meant to give you. There are 7 universal emotions that produce these involuntary expressions: anger, fear, sadness, happiness, disgust, surprise, and contempt. They appear across every culture, race, and background, even in people blind from birth. They are embedded in our evolutionary code. But in the real world, people rarely express them in isolation. What you will often see is a microflicker of anger under a smile, a flash of disgust before forced enthusiasm, a pulse of fear behind a confident tone. This is where real emotional reading happens, in the contradiction between what is displayed and what is momentarily revealed. The most dangerous emotion to ignore is contempt. It often arrives as a smirk, a slight tightening of one side of the mouth, or a subtle raising of the chin. It is not loud, but it signals something corrosive, the belief that someone is beneath you. Contempt erodes trust faster than anger or sadness ever could, because it communicates superiority with just a glance. In relationships, contempt is often the first crack in the foundation. In business, it's the invisible poison that turns negotiations toxic. When you see contempt, take it seriously. It rarely fades on its own. It festers. The mistake many people make when trying to read expressions is that they look for single moments to tell the whole story. But emotion doesn't live in snapshots, it lives in sequences. In how someone responds before and after a question. In what their face does when they pause. In whether the emotion they show matches the emotion the situation calls for. A genuine smile, for example, involves not just the mouth but the eyes. The skin around the eyes contracts, creating crow's feet. This is known as the Duchenne smile. You cannot activate it voluntarily. If someone is smiling but their eyes remain flat, it's a mask. A polite signal, not an emotional truth. A fake smile may last too long, appear too quickly, or linger after the rest of the face has dropped back into neutrality. It is the performance of happiness, not the presence of it. Emotionally intelligent manipulators know how to mimic expressions. They can mirror sadness, soften their voice, even time their reactions. But they often make mistakes. They overplay it. They don't blink at the right moment. Their expressions are too symmetrical, too rehearsed, too convenient. Real emotion never arrives perfectly on cue. The irony is this: the people who try hardest to control their expressions often reveal more than those who don't. Their energy is focused on the performance, but they forget to manage the moments in between. It's in those moments, the transition from one expression to another, the delay before a response, the quick clearing of the throat, that the mask slips. And you must train yourself to live in those gaps. Look not just at what someone does, but at how quickly they do it, how their face resets, whether the emotion appears too fast or disappears too slowly. Ask yourself, does this match the context? Is this consistent with what came before? If it doesn't, they're telling two stories. One with words and one with their face. Always believe the face. To read people at this level is not just a skill. It is a shift in perception. You are no longer seeing what people show, you are seeing what they try not to. It is an unsettling power at first. You'll begin to notice friends masking resentment with laughter, colleagues faking interest with polite nods, strangers revealing fear while claiming confidence. But the more you see, the more you understand. And the more you understand, the harder it becomes for anyone to lie to you. The emotional truth is always there. Just fast. Just quiet. Just waiting for someone who knows how to see it. Chapter 3: Body Language, the Silent Language. Long before humans formed words, we moved. And those movements, subtle, instinctive, often unconscious, formed a language far older and more revealing than speech. To understand body language is not merely to interpret gestures, but to peer into a deeper layer of human psychology, one that operates below awareness and above words. The primitive pulse beneath every movement. Our bodies are messengers of the unconscious. When a person feels threatened, their body stiffens before they realize why. When someone desires power or approval, their posture shifts, often without intent. The mind may conceal, rehearse, or distort, but the body leaks truth in a raw, unfiltered dialect, one that we speak fluently even if we don't know we do. This silent language emerged for survival. Long before language, creatures relied on posture to signal aggression, openness, fear, or mating readiness. The reptilian brain, the oldest layer of our cognition, still governs much of this behavior. So when we cross our arms, avert our gaze, or tap our foot, it is not random. It is ancient. The myth of the one-to-one signal. One of the gravest mistakes in reading body language is reductionism, the belief that every gesture has a universal, fixed meaning. Crossed arms equal defensiveness. Looking away means lying. A smile means joy. These assumptions are seductive and dangerously oversimplified. In reality, body language must be interpreted within context and clusters. A man sitting with arms crossed in a cold room may simply be warming himself. A woman looking away during conversation might be gathering her thoughts, not concealing deception. Reading people means reading patterns, repeated deviations from their normal behavior, especially under pressure or contradiction. Baseline, the measure of authenticity. To read body language with precision, you must establish a person's baseline, their default mode of expression when they are relaxed and truthful. This gives you the framework to notice what matters: deviation. A typically confident speaker who begins stammering during a specific topic. A calm colleague who suddenly avoids eye contact when a name is mentioned. The deviation is the signal. The baseline is the measure. You cannot see change unless you know what is typical. Posture, the architecture of emotion. Posture is a person's emotional architecture. It reveals how they carry not just their body, but their self. A dominant individual often stands tall, chest slightly expanded, shoulders relaxed, making themselves spatially large. In contrast, someone uncertain may unconsciously shrink, hunching, crossing arms, minimizing their presence. But posture is not merely physical, it's psychological. People with high self-worth tend to move with fluidity, presence, and ease. Those who feel watched, judged, or insecure often move jerkily or self-consciously, as if they're trying to escape the spotlight of attention. Example, in high-stakes negotiations, seasoned professionals often remain perfectly still, while less experienced ones fidget, adjust their ties, or shift in their seats. Stillness here becomes a form of power, a signal of emotional control. The legs and feet, honesty below the waist. The upper body is often trained. We know we're being watched, so we rehearse our smiles, maintain eye contact, mimic openness. But below the waist, our honesty often survives. Feet tend to point toward where a person wants to go. If someone is engaged, their feet will often be aligned with you. If they're checked out, one foot may subtly angle toward the exit. Crossed legs, bouncing knees, heel taps, these are often unconscious indicators of restlessness, anxiety, or a desire to break away. The legs reveal what the mouth won't say. Gestures and rhythm, the tempo of the mind. The speed and fluidity of a person's movements often mirror their internal state. Smooth, measured gestures reflect calm and control. Rapid or erratic hand movements may suggest stress, nervous energy, or a desire to manipulate perception. Pay attention to gesture clusters when multiple body signals align to create a coherent emotional message. Case insight: a job candidate smiles, nods confidently, but keeps fidgeting with a pen, bouncing their foot, and glancing sideways. The words say, "I'm prepared." The body says, "I'm unsure." Trust the body. Cultural filters and personal habits. Not all body language is universal. Cultural norms, personal history, and situational context can all shape expression. In some cultures, avoiding eye contact is a sign of respect. In others, it suggests dishonesty. Learn to factor in cultural nuance and individual temperament before making conclusions. The goal is not to read people fast, but to read them deeply. To read the body is to listen to the soul's whisper. It requires patience, attention, and the humility to accept ambiguity. But when you train yourself to see, to truly observe, you gain access to a level of truth that words cannot counterfeit. In body language, every motion is a message. The question is, are you watching? Chapter 4: Eyes, Hands, and the Face, the Emotional Beacons. To truly understand people, you must begin where they cannot hide, the terrain of their face, their hands, and their eyes. These parts of the body are emotional instruments, often playing melodies unknown even to the one performing them. Though the voice may be trained, though the intellect may be filtered, the face and hands betray with the simplicity of instinct. They leak the truth. They whisper discomfort. They rebel against the mask of control. The face, a site of emotional tension. Human beings are compulsive social performers. From early childhood, we are conditioned to modulate our expressions, to smile when uncomfortable, to look calm when anxious, to pretend interest when bored. The face becomes a surface of negotiation between our inner experience and external expectations. But emotion resists domestication. It bleeds through. In the space of a single second, dozens of tiny facial muscles react to stimuli faster than conscious thought. This is where micro-expressions live. They last between 1/25th to 1/5 of a second. A micro-expression of fear may flash across the face just before the conscious mask of confidence is reapplied. Example: a public figure announces a controversial decision. The cameras are rolling. As the journalist asks a pointed question for less than half a second, the corners of the mouth pull laterally, a flash of contempt. The smile follows immediately, smooth and trained. But to the trained observer, the mask cracks. The true emotion blinks into view. Insight: micro-expressions are not accidental, they are neurological reflexes. You do not need to believe them to display them. You merely need to feel them for a moment. And that is enough. Eyes, the most uncooperative liars. The reason we say the eyes are the window to the soul is because they are the least rehearsed. While the mouth is constantly coached in etiquette, persuasion, seduction, the eyes tend to remain more primal. There is no social training on how to control your pupils. You cannot consciously shrink them when you dislike something. You cannot dilate them by force when aroused. And therein lies their value. Here's what the eyes reveal. Eye contact. Prolonged eye contact can signal confidence or challenge. Too little may indicate discomfort, guilt, or submissiveness. Shifting gaze during questions often signals cognitive stress, not necessarily deception, but paired with facial tension, it raises flags. Blink rate. Normal blink rate is 15 to 20 per minute. Under stress or deception, blink rate often increases dramatically. A sudden freeze in blinking can also occur when someone is mentally rehearsing a falsehood. They are focused inward. Pupil dilation. Pupils dilate in the presence of something desired or feared. They constrict with disinterest or repulsion. In high-stakes interactions, romantic, confrontational, or persuasive, pupil response is often the most honest indicator of internal truth. Advanced insight. A deceptive person may maintain eye contact consciously, knowing it creates trust, but their pupils may contract as their nervous system registers fear. The truth is often visible not in what they control, but in what they forget to control. Hands, the nervous truth tellers. We tend to focus on the face in conversations, but the hands are where unsupervised emotion lives. Unlike the face, hands are not constantly under social surveillance. They fidget, grasp, twitch, and betray with abandon. Hands are motor extensions of emotion. Anger drives fists to clench. Anxiety compels fingers to tap or twist. Deceit causes self-soothing behaviors, rubbing palms, touching the neck, hiding thumbs. Even culturally specific hand gestures carry universal emotional payloads. Open palms signal openness. Hidden hands signal caution. Sudden stillness in previously expressive hands is often a sign of emotional bracing. The person has moved from expression to defense. Example: a job candidate enthusiastically answers every question. Their voice is fluid, their face animated. But their hands? Curled in their lap, rigid, or repeatedly touching their thighs. The hands betray tension, possibly fear of exposure. The words are confident, but the body does not agree. Insight: to read a person accurately, always match verbal claims against physical behavior. Congruence builds trust. Incongruence should trigger curiosity, not immediate suspicion, but never ignore it. The 3 layers of incongruence. To read someone deeply, look for incongruence across these layers. Verbal, nonverbal mismatch. The person says they are fine, but they press their lips, blink rapidly, and fidget. Internal nonverbal mismatch. The face smiles, but the eyes remain cold and unengaged. The body leans forward, but the feet point toward the exit. Temporal mismatch. A delay between stimulus and emotional reaction can signal mental filtering or deceit. Genuine emotion tends to surface immediately and vanish quickly. Faked emotion often arrives late and lingers too long. You are not just watching behavior, you are studying emotional physics. Pressure, resistance, flow, and fracture. Understanding expression as strategy. In high-level communication, people use expression tactically. A negotiator might use deliberate pauses, raised brows, or timed silences to create unease. A manipulator might deploy fake empathy, nodding, soft tones, and sympathetic eye contact, while their hands stay concealed, betraying no personal investment. A leader may train themselves to use serene stillness in their face, but if you look closely, you'll see their nostrils flare during conflict or their pupils shrink under criticism. Expression is never neutral. Either it is a reflection or a tool. Your job is to know which. Chapter 5. The body never stops speaking. Decoding full body signals. We are taught to listen to words. The sharp ones, the clever ones, the beautiful ones. But words are slow, they arrive late, they are revised, they are chosen. The body, in contrast, speaks in real time. Stumbles, shifts, reacts. It stutters emotionally before the mind even knows why. If the face is a screen, the body is the projector. It reveals the emotional movie unfolding inside. You can lie with your mouth. You can even rehearse a convincing smile. But the shoulders will slump under weight no one sees. The spine will recoil from rejection it dares not name. The legs will lean away from what you say you love. To read a person, you must read the whole of them. Embodied emotion, how the body becomes the message. The body is a landscape of tensions and relaxations. Each movement reveals alignment or contradiction between words and feeling. Every emotional state has a posture: confidence, an upright spine, exposed torso, relaxed hands. Fear, constricted chest, shoulders pulled inward, feet shifting or retracting. Dominance, expanded posture, space-claiming gestures, lowered vocal tone. Shame, downcast gaze, collapsed shoulders, head retracted into the neck. These postures are not random. They are biological expressions of neurological states. When a person feels powerless, the muscles physically contract to protect vital areas. When a person feels powerful, the body expands, opens, and slows because there is no threat to rush from. The lie is always slower than the emotion. Watch the body before the person realizes they're being watched. Gesture clusters, reading in groups, not pieces. The beginner looks for signs. The master looks for clusters. No single movement should ever be read in isolation. Meaning lives in the consistency across signals, not in a lone gesture. For example, a single arm cross does not indicate defensiveness. But arms crossed plus torso angled away plus minimal eye contact, that's emotional withdrawal. A person leans forward while speaking, but their feet point toward the door and their hands fidget on their lap. Their engagement is partial, likely social, not genuine. A single movement can lie. A pattern of movements rarely does. Example, deception clue. A person is recounting a story and gestures freely until they reach the part where the lie is inserted. Suddenly, movement becomes limited, their voice slows, and their blink rate rises. Their energy collapses. This is the emotional cost of deception. The body hesitates where the truth once flowed. Distance, direction, and orientation, where the body points. We are unconsciously drawn toward what we value and repelled from what we don't. Spatial dynamics, often ignored in casual observation, reveal deep emotional preferences. Feet, perhaps the most honest part of the body. People may control their face and voice, but feet tend to point toward emotional interest and away from discomfort or disinterest. Torso orientation, turning your chest towards someone, is an act of openness or focus. Angling away signals distance or disengagement. Proximity, people move closer to what makes them feel safe, excited, or powerful. They increase space when they feel vulnerable or resistant. These are not small details. These are emotional orientations, directional signals of interest, threat, and power. The weight of stillness. Stillness is often misread as calm. In reality, stillness can mean many things. Relaxed stillness, grounded, fluid, confident. Rigid stillness, frozen under stress, holding back emotion, preparing to defend or deceive. Strategic stillness, calculated control, often used in power dynamics. A leader who speaks slowly and moves minimally is owning time and space. Insight: in moments of conflict, stillness becomes diagnostic. If someone suddenly freezes, you are witnessing a stress response. The body has paused, it is bracing. This is a window. Emotional impact has occurred even if they say everything's fine. When the body disagrees with the voice. This is the essence of emotional reading, the search for contradiction. A person laughs, but their shoulders remain stiff. They praise you, but step slightly back with each word. They thank you, but their hands stay hidden in their sleeves. In these moments, trust the body. It has no agenda. It reacts, not plans. Emotional momentum and transitions. Another dimension of reading the body is to observe how movement shifts over time. Emotion is not static, it evolves, and the transitions between emotional states are revealing. A person may start the conversation open and confident, receive a challenging question, the chest contracts, voice stumbles, one leg shifts backward. Recover with a laugh, but the body never fully returns to its original ease. These transitions, the microevolutions of posture, energy, and tension, are the best indicators of emotional impact. They show when the mask starts slipping, when stress begins accumulating, when power subtly shifts. Master the language of whole-body listening. To truly read someone, you must watch their entry posture. How they walk into a room says more than their first words. Track energy flow. Notice when it rises, engagement, or drops, disengagement. Follow congruence. Do the words match the gestures, tone, posture? Observe transitions. What emotion follows what? And what triggered the change? This is not about suspicion, it is about awareness. You are not looking for flaws in people, you are learning to see clearly without being seduced by masks or distracted by noise. Final insight. The body never stops speaking. The only question is whether you are listening with trained eyes or still stuck in the world of words. Part 3. Applied people reading, strategy, context, and connection. Chapter 1. The social chessboard, emotional strategy in conversation. In every social setting, there is an invisible game being played, one governed not by words alone, but by emotional undercurrents, power dynamics, and silent cues. Most people remain unaware of the board they are standing on. They speak without noticing the shift in tone around them. They miss the glance between two people across the room. They respond to the surface, unaware of what is brewing underneath. But the emotionally fluent person sees the game. They don't just hear, they read. They don't just react, they adapt. In conversation, they become both observer and strategist, understanding that every word, every pause, and every expression is part of a larger emotional pattern. They play their role deliberately, knowing when to lead, when to follow, and when to shift the entire tone of the room. This is emotional strategy in action. This is the social chessboard. The room is never emotionally neutral. Every conversation begins in an emotional climate. Sometimes it's charged, tense, defensive, eager. Other times it's neutral or confused, waiting to be shaped. Entering a conversation without reading that climate is like walking onto a battlefield blindfolded. You may say something perfectly reasonable and still provoke resistance, not because of what you said, but when and how you said it. Imagine entering a meeting where everyone is stiff, quiet, and avoiding eye contact. Something happened before you arrived. You don't need words to know this. The air is thick, the body language muted, the voice is low. The untrained observer may begin their presentation oblivious to the tension. The emotionally aware individual, on the other hand, takes a beat. They ask a disarming question, crack a gentle joke, or shift their tone into empathy, something that punctures the emotional fog. This is not manipulation. It is attunement. Emotional intelligence allows you to meet people where they are and then guide the tone to where it needs to be. Reading the board, dynamics, roles, and currents. In every social group, roles emerge. There are leaders and followers, attention seekers and peacekeepers, skeptics and allies. These roles are not always official, but they are always emotionally present. To read the room, you must look for who speaks most and who watches silently. Silence is never absence. The quietest person often has the sharpest judgment. Who reacts to whom? Watch the emotional ripples. If person A laughs only after person B does, the hierarchy is clear. Emotional mirroring. Who adopts whose posture? Whose tone sets the rhythm? Micro-conflicts. Watch for subtle eye rolls, interruptions, dismissive gestures. These are the early tremors before open disagreement. An emotionally strategic person doesn't just notice these dynamics, they use them. They can ally themselves with a silent influencer by acknowledging their presence or posing a direct question. They can disarm a skeptic by validating their concern before offering a counterpoint. Like a chess player who sees 3 moves ahead, they don't speak for the sake of speaking. Every gesture, every sentence has intent. Emotional shifting, turning the tide of conversation. Most conversations follow emotional inertia. Whatever tone starts the interaction tends to guide its course. But emotional intelligence gives you the power to shift that course deliberately. Consider a team meeting spiraling into complaint and pessimism. Each speaker echoes the last, building a shared sense of defeat. Then one person changes the tone, not by ignoring the frustration, but by naming it, reframing it, and introducing a new energy. It's clear we're all frustrated, and rightfully so. But maybe this pressure is what forces the breakthrough. Let's use it. That statement, delivered with calm strength, breaks the inertia. It turns complaints into possibility. The speaker becomes a subtle leader, not by dominating, but by redirecting emotional flow. You can do this through tone shifts, dropping your voice, slowing down, signaling gravity or empathy. Emotional labeling, naming what others feel before arguing or offering ideas. Contrast, introducing a new perspective that reframes the current emotional pattern. The key is authenticity. If the shift feels forced or insincere, it will be rejected. But if it's grounded, if it mirrors what people feel, yet lifts them one level higher, it will be followed. The role you play and the role you choose. You are never emotionally invisible. Whether you intend to or not, you play a role in every room you enter. Maybe you're the challenger, the harmonizer, the comic relief, the quiet anchor. But the emotionally intelligent person doesn't default to a role, they choose it. Sometimes you enter a room where emotions are chaotic. In that moment, your role may be to stabilize. In other moments, a group is flat or disconnected, your role may be to energize or provoke. Strategic emotional readers are like actors and directors at once. They perform, but they also shape the scene around them. The mistake many make is overperforming a role. The jokester who can't turn serious. The leader who must always dominate. The peacemaker who avoids necessary conflict. Emotional strategy is not rigidity, it is fluidity. It is the ability to adjust without losing your core. Mastering the flow, conversation as emotional architecture. At its highest level, conversation becomes architecture. You build something. Each interaction is a structure of mood, meaning, and connection. A single conversation can elevate someone, shift a belief, or change your relationship's trajectory. But this only happens when you stop thinking in words alone and begin thinking in emotional flow. Before you speak, you feel the room. As you speak, you sense shifts. After you speak, you observe the aftermath. Chapter 2: Emotional Power Plays, Navigating Manipulation and Influence. To move through the world with emotional fluency is not just to read people, it is to see the games beneath the game. In every conversation, there is the message and then there is the maneuver. Behind the charming tone, there may be control. Beneath vulnerability, there may be bait. Most people are emotionally blind to these layers. They get pulled, pushed, softened, or steered, and they feel something is off but can't name it. You must become fluent not only in connection but in protection. Emotional intelligence without boundaries becomes naivete. Compassion without clarity becomes a trap. This chapter will show you how to recognize emotional power plays as they unfold, how to detect manipulation in its subtle and overt forms, and how to respond, not with emotional reactivity, but with quiet precision and strength. Influence and manipulation, the thin line. All influence uses emotion. That's not inherently manipulative. Every great speaker, leader, or artist knows how to move people, and to move someone emotionally is to influence their behavior, even if gently. But manipulation begins when the emotional cues are deceptive, when the tears are strategic, when kindness is calculated, when guilt is weaponized or flattery is a lure. It is not just about what is said, it is why and with what emotional leverage. A manipulator understands the human emotional reflexes. The need to be liked, the fear of being the bad guy, the guilt of saying no, the instinct to protect the vulnerable, the discomfort with confrontation. They pull those levers, and most people don't realize they've been played until much later, if at all. The emotionally fluent person sees these patterns in real time. Common emotional power plays. Let us examine the most common tactics used in emotional manipulation, not from a place of paranoia, but from awareness. When you know the pattern, you cannot be pulled blindly into it. The victim gambit. The manipulator paints themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, or emotionally fragile. Their suffering becomes a tool used to silence opposition, evade responsibility, or win sympathy. You feel guilty for holding boundaries. You feel cruel for questioning their story. Watch for excessive self-pity, rehearsed vulnerability, disproportionate emotional reactions to mild boundaries. The guilt hook. Here, the manipulator casts your actions, however reasonable, as hurtful or disappointing. They make you feel responsible for their emotions. Suddenly, you're apologizing for being honest or sacrificing your needs to maintain peace. Watch for, after everything I've done for you, or I guess I just don't matter. The flattery trap. You're praised, elevated, idealized until you become compliant. Then the real question comes. This strategy is often used in persuasion and seduction. You feel seen, appreciated, and in return you lower your guard. Watch for over-the-top praise early on or love bombing in relationships. The silent pressure. Instead of speaking directly, the manipulator withdraws affection, gives the cold shoulder, or becomes passively cold. You feel pressure to fix something, even if nothing is named. This gives them emotional leverage without confrontation. Watch for sudden distance after disagreement, refusal to name what's wrong, making you work for emotional reconnection. The outrage tactic. By overreacting emotionally, anger, tears, threats, they intimidate you into retreat. This is common in both personal and professional dynamics. The goal is to make you fear escalation and fold. Watch for disproportionate emotional explosions following boundaries or no. Reading the emotion beneath the emotion. What makes manipulation powerful is its emotional mask. The person may appear sad, loving, hurt, or confused, but the emotionally fluent reader asks, what is this emotion accomplishing? What changes in your behavior as a result? Emotion is real, but motive can still be strategic. One of the most powerful skills you can build is split awareness. The ability to feel for someone without losing sight of what they are doing. You can say to yourself, I see that they're upset. That's real. But I also notice this upsetness tends to appear when they don't get their way. You hold both truths, and from that place you respond with strength and grace. Responding to manipulation without war. When you detect a power play, there are 3 common traps. Collapse, giving in to avoid discomfort. Explosion, reacting emotionally and losing control. Confrontation without leverage, calling it out too early, before you understand the full pattern. Instead, the emotionally strategic person engages with calm clarity. They don't over-explain. They don't get pulled into emotional bait. They stay steady. Some tactical responses. Naming without blaming. It seems like you're upset that I said no. I just want to make sure we're being clear, not using guilt to decide. Boundary with warmth. I care about you, but I need space to think about this. Let's come back to it later. Disarming with truth. When you react like this, it makes it hard to talk honestly. I'm willing to continue if we can stay calm. These phrases are not scripts, they're signals. They show that you see what's happening, but you're not escalating. You become harder to push, harder to bait, harder to play. That alone disrupts the manipulative pattern, the power of emotional detachment. The greatest protection is not needing the approval of the person trying to manipulate you. Emotional detachment does not mean coldness, it means clarity. You love but don't fawn. You empathize but don't make excuses. You listen but don't absorb guilt that isn't yours. Manipulators rely on your emotional reflexes. The moment you pause, breathe, and assess not just what they say, but why they say it, you shift out of reflex into response. That gap is power. Chapter 3, Intimacy and Emotional Fluency, Reading Between the Heartbeats. The arena of emotional exposure. In no arena are emotions more exposed, more volatile, and more consequential than in intimacy. Whether romantic, familial, or deeply platonic, intimate relationships test the very foundation of your emotional fluency. Here, you are not just reading others, you are being read. You are not just analyzing emotional patterns, you are living in them. In this domain, most people fall into one of 2 traps. Either they become hyperreactive, overanalyzing every word, tone, and gesture, or they go blind, dismissing subtle signs of emotional drift until the relationship crumbles under silent weight. Emotional fluency in intimacy is not about control. It is about connection through clarity. It is about seeing what is unspoken, hearing what is withheld, and responding with presence instead of projection. This chapter explores how to read emotional cues in those closest to you, not to fix or dominate them, but to understand, to support, and to protect the shared space where trust and love grow or die. The myth of knowing someone. Time does not equal understanding. Many people believe that the longer they are with someone, the more they know them. But time can breed assumptions just as easily as it breeds intimacy. Emotional cues become invisible because you stop looking. You believe you've seen all there is to see. And so, when your partner's eyes linger a little longer on their phone, or their voice tightens slightly at your comment, you miss it. And when resentment brews silently over weeks or months, it takes you by surprise because you stopped listening emotionally. Emotionally fluent individuals never stop observing. They don't spy, they attune. They understand that change is constant and emotional climates shift daily. A small withdrawal, a muted laugh, a hesitated touch. These are not always signs of doom, but they are signs of something. The fluent person notices, and instead of accusing or ignoring, they inquire. I noticed you've been quiet the last few days. Not in a bad way, just different. Is something on your mind? One question like this can open a door, and one unopened door, left long enough, becomes a wall. The language of withdrawal and microdistance. Intimacy rarely ends with a bang. It erodes in whispers, in pauses, in missing looks. The greatest signal of emotional trouble is not argument. It is distance. And it often begins subtly. Conversations become shorter, more transactional. Affection is given out of routine, not desire. Contact fades. The body turns away more often. Humor becomes sharper or disappears altogether. Moments of silence stretch longer than they used to. Most people rationalize these shifts. We're both just busy. This is just a phase. But emotional drift doesn't correct itself. It must be noticed, named, and navigated. The emotionally fluent partner reads these signals early, not with panic, but with presence. They don't make it about themselves immediately. They stay open. I've noticed we haven't laughed as much this week. I missed that. Is there something I'm not seeing? Not accusation, not performance, just an emotionally open bid to reconnect. Emotional honesty versus emotional pressure. One of the great misuses of emotional language in relationships is weaponizing honesty to unload unfiltered emotion. There's a difference between being honest and making someone carry your emotional chaos. Emotional honesty says, I've been feeling distant, and I want us to feel closer again. Emotional pressure says, you're the reason I feel this way, and you need to fix it. Emotionally fluent people speak their truth with ownership. They don't dump. They don't dramatize. They describe what they're experiencing and invite dialogue. This subtlety creates safety. I know I've been a little tense lately. It's not about you, but I want to share what's been on my mind. That framing softens defenses. It opens doors instead of triggering walls. In emotionally connected relationships, both people learn to co-hold emotional truth, not hurl it like weapons. Reading emotional needs that go unspoken. Not all emotional needs are expressed clearly. Often, what a partner says is the outer shell of a deeper request. Emotional fluency means listening beyond content to yearning. A complaint about you always being on your phone may be a plea, I need your presence. A sarcastic jab about household tasks may hide, I want to feel supported, not alone. A sudden pullback from physical touch might not be rejection. It might be unspoken stress, shame, or overwhelm. Reading these signals is not about mind reading, it's about pattern recognition. It's about listening not just with the ears, but with emotional memory. Fluent partners begin to recognize their loved one's emotional fingerprints. They know the difference between tired silence and hurt silence, between "I'm fine" and "I'm afraid to tell you what's really wrong." And they respond not with logic, but with emotional presence. Sometimes the most fluent response is not advice. It is stillness, a touch, a sentence like, "You don't have to explain. I'm here when you're ready." That kind of emotional posture builds trust in ways words never could. Repair, the highest form of fluency. All relationships experience rupture, misunderstandings, sharp words, broken agreements. The question is not if damage will occur, it's how you repair. Emotional fluency shows its greatest strength not in prevention, but in reconnection. Those who master emotional reading in relationships don't strive for perfection. They strive for awareness and repair. They notice when their partner shuts down even if they won the argument. They double back when they realize a joke cut too deep. They say what I meant to say was and clean up the message before resentment forms. This ability to track emotional impact in real time and course correct quickly is the glue of lasting intimacy. Chapter 4: Authority and Subtle Signals, Emotional Intelligence at Work. In any workplace, the overt hierarchy, who reports to whom, who signs off, whose name sits above the door, is rarely the full picture. Real authority is often silent, hidden beneath titles and org charts, operating through glances, tones, and unspoken alliances. The emotionally intelligent person learns to read this subterranean terrain where subtle emotional signals can either grant or deny influence. At the center of power lies emotional perception. A leader's authority does not merely come from position, it comes from the way others emotionally respond to them. Do they feel tension when she enters the room? Do voices lower when he speaks? Does the room subtly reorganize around someone's opinion even if they haven't been formally introduced as the boss? These are not accidents, they are the echoes of emotional authority in motion. To survive, let alone thrive, in a professional environment, you must learn to read power not just through logic but through feeling. Emotional intelligence at work is the capacity to detect the cues that others miss, the raised eyebrow of approval, the smile that never reaches the eyes, the performative compliment delivered with an undercurrent of threat. You are not merely listening to words. You are reading emotional signatures. The emotional architecture of power. Authority always arranges the emotional environment around it. Even when unstated, it draws attention, bends conversation, silences dissent. The emotionally fluent individual sees the invisible walls of status before crashing into them. They recognize who sets the emotional tone of the room, not necessarily the one speaking the most, but the one whose presence recalibrates everyone else's behavior. Often, this person does not raise their voice. They do not need to. Their influence is expressed through what Daniel Goleman once called the emotional thermostat. Others adjust to their mood. When they are tense, the whole team becomes vigilant. When they are relaxed, people breathe easier. These are signs of unspoken power. To read this, you must train your sensitivity. Ask yourself, who do people look to before they speak? Whose jokes everyone laughs at even when they aren't funny? Who can end a conversation with a single look? These are not rhetorical questions. They are emotional probes into the power structure. Micro-expressions, the language of approval and threat. Power does not always declare itself. Often it leaks through fleeting facial expressions, tiny gestures of dominance or discomfort, approvals too subtle for language. These micro-expressions are brief, a half a second or less, but they are honest. They bypass conscious control and reveal the speaker's true emotional state. A twitch of contempt in a meeting, barely there, a slight lift of the lip tells you who feels superior. A flash of surprise or admiration tells you whose opinion holds weight. A person raises their chin slightly when disagreeing, not lowering it. This is not submission, but a subtle challenge. Reading micro-expressions is not about staring at someone's face like a detective. It is about holding an open and receptive awareness. You train yourself to register emotional nuance the way a conductor hears a missed note. You know when the harmony is broken. In high-stakes workplaces, these signals are the currency of politics. An approving glance could be more valuable than an official endorsement. A frown from the wrong person can bury a project. Those who ignore emotional signals find themselves blindsided, confused when decisions are made without them, frustrated when logic alone does not open doors. Status games and emotional displays. Status is performed. It is choreographed through dress, posture, speech patterns, and especially through emotional control. The higher status individual appears composed. They display selective emotion, never overreacting, never revealing too much. Their confidence is shown in their stillness. The lower status individual over-explains, tries to prove themselves, laughs too hard at jokes not meant for them. These are unconscious attempts to gain approval, to be accepted into a power structure they don't yet understand. To read this dynamic is to become socially strategic. You observe how people manage their emotions in group settings. Who is allowed to be angry without consequence? Who apologizes the most? Who speaks first in meetings and whose voice changes when certain people enter the room? These observations tell you not just what is happening, but why. And once you know the why, you gain choice. The choice to play along, to redirect, or to disrupt. Managing your own emotional perception. Emotional intelligence at work is not only about reading others, it's about managing how you are read. The emotionally perceptive person not only understands the room, they know what the room sees when it looks at them. This is not manipulation. It is emotional clarity. You are always sending a signal. Your posture, tone, energy all communicate your internal state. If you are anxious but hiding it, others may still register it and unconsciously lose confidence in you. If you appear arrogant, people may resist your ideas regardless of their merit. To lead emotionally is to become intentional with your signals. You modulate your tone to lower the threat. You hold eye contact to signal confidence, but you break it strategically to signal respect. You allow others to speak first, not out of deference, but to gather the emotional map of the room before you act. A high-level emotional communicator becomes fluent in shifting perceptions, stepping into a room and becoming exactly what the room needs: calm during chaos, strength during doubt, humility in the presence of power. Power without words. The ultimate emotional intelligence is quiet. It does not advertise itself. It reveals itself in results, alliances formed without a single overt request, influence exerted without command. In the end, emotional intelligence in the workplace is not about being nice or agreeable. It is about seeing the structures beneath the surface, seeing the person beneath the performance, seeing the moment when one smile can alter the direction of an entire conversation. And when you can see clearly, you can act wisely. Chapter 5: High-Stakes Reading, Conflict, Crisis, and Confrontation. There are moments when the emotional temperature spikes. Arguments erupt, threats emerge, or stakes rise beyond the ordinary. In these moments, conflict, crisis, and confrontation, many people either freeze, fight, or fumble. But the emotionally fluent don't react blindly. They read the room while others lose their heads. They stay grounded in storms. They navigate not only what is said, but what is emotionally true beneath the noise. In high-stakes situations, emotion is the battlefield and perception is your weapon. You cannot afford to misread a threat as a joke or a silence as indifference. Precision here isn't a luxury. It's survival. Let us now explore how the emotionally fluent move through tension, not by avoiding it, but by understanding it so clearly it can be redirected, disarmed, or used. The anatomy of emotional escalation. Conflict rarely begins with the event itself. It begins with the emotional residue left unspoken. Resentment, insecurity, humiliation, unmet needs, these simmer quietly until a small moment detonates them. Emotionally fluent people are attuned to this escalation pattern. Subtle shifts, tone becomes clipped, body tightens, eye contact changes. Emotional baiting, passive-aggressive comments, provocation, or testing begins. The event, a spark, disagreement, insult, boundary, or perceived disrespect. The emotional spill, the person reacts, but it's never just about this moment. It's a release of stored emotion. If you read the signs early, you don't get blindsided. You know that the person yelling about being left out of the meeting is actually reacting to weeks of feeling excluded. The sharp tone isn't about you, it's about them leaking unprocessed emotion in your direction. The emotionally fluent ask, what's this really about? And just as crucially, what emotion am I being asked to carry that isn't mine? How to read conflict while you're in it. When confrontation strikes, most people either match the aggression or retreat. But the emotionally fluent observe while engaging. Here's what they read. Voice modulation, pitch rising equals fear or anger. Slowing down equals control. Whispering equals shame or secrecy. Breath, shallow and fast equals rising panic. Controlled exhale equals trying to calm themselves or you. Face tension, the jaw and forehead reveal internal pressure. Even when words are calm, a clenched jaw screams resistance. Eyes, direct gaze may show courage or challenge. Looking away might mean deception or vulnerability. Dilated pupils equals adrenaline. Reading these cues tells you where their emotions are headed, not just where they are now. This is how you preempt escalation. You read the temperature before it boils over. The silent conflict, when nothing is said, but everything is felt. Some confrontations never go vocal. They live in the silences. The tension between two team members no one talks about. The long pause before a cold, I'm fine. The moment someone forgets to invite you again. These are emotional landmines. They may not explode today, but they are rigged with meaning. The emotionally fluent approach silence like a translator, not an interrogator. They don't force the truth, they invite it. They ask, is there anything you haven't said that's weighing on you? I felt something shift. Was it something I missed? You've gone quiet, and I want to understand what's behind that. The goal is not confrontation, it's clarity. And often, one well-timed question diffuses a much bigger emotional bomb later. Crisis. When clarity saves lives and relationships. In a real crisis, trauma, betrayal, loss, public failure, people lose their emotional compass. Fear takes the wheel. And in those moments, emotionally fluent individuals become anchors. They slow the pace of the room, using calm tone and grounded body language. Speak in emotionally regulating sentences like, "We're going to handle one thing at a time. You're not alone in this. I'm staying with you. Right now you don't need all the answers, just the next step." Scan the room or person for the unspoken needs. Who's in shock? Who's dissociating? Who's hiding their pain behind anger? In a crisis, reading emotion is not just a skill. It's a form of leadership. The warrior's calm, responding under fire. Some people try to provoke you, not from pain, but from power play. These are emotional aggressors, manipulators, bullies, narcissistic personalities. They bait you to lose control so they can seize it. Here's how emotional fluency wins. You read the bait, but don't bite. You pause, scan, and speak last. You lower your voice when they raise theirs. You focus not on punishing them, but on revealing them. Example: I hear how upset you are. Are you speaking to solve this or just to vent? If this is about control, tell me. If it's about clarity, I'm listening. We can speak when respect returns to the conversation. These lines expose dynamics without escalating them. They are verbal aikido, redirecting force, not matching it. Reading yourself during confrontation. Finally, emotional fluency isn't just about reading others. It's about reading yourself, especially when emotions run hot. Ask, what old wound is this poking? Am I reacting to them or to someone from my past they remind me of? Is this about justice or my ego? What am I afraid this moment means about me? The greatest misreads happen when your own emotion hijacks your perception. But when you remain self-aware, you stay free, not detached, discerning. Part 4, Growth and Integration, Becoming Emotionally Fluent. Chapter 1, From Reaction to Response, Emotional Mastery as a Way of Being. There is a moment infinitesimally small between stimulus and response. Someone insults you, disrespects your work, challenges your authority, says something cutting when you least expect it. The average person reacts. They raise their voice, shut down, retaliate, over-explain. They feel hijacked by emotion, and the emotional aftermath lasts for hours or days. But the emotionally fluent live in that small gap. They pause. They feel the surge, but do not drown in it. They respond with awareness, not impulse. This is not about emotional suppression. It is about emotional sovereignty, the ability to choose your internal state and your outward behavior with precision, even under fire. The myth of control versus the truth of mastery. There is a common misunderstanding in modern self-help that emotional strength means you always stay calm, stoic, unaffected. That's not mastery, that's suppression in costume. True emotional mastery begins not with control, but with recognition. You don't silence the emotion, you name it, observe it, listen to it. Then you decide how to respond with intention rather than react from conditioning. A person cuts you off in traffic. A client disrespects you in front of others. A partner forgets something important to you. You feel anger, shame, rejection. You don't pretend you don't, but you also don't become a slave to it. You take a breath. You examine the emotion like a sculptor examines a block of marble. What is this really made of? Where did this originate? Who am I becoming if I act from it? This level of inquiry turns every emotional trigger into a doorway, not into weakness, but into greater presence and power. Emotion is a messenger, not a master. Every emotion comes with a message. But most people never get the message because they react to the packaging. Anger shows up screaming, but beneath it is a message about violated boundaries. Envy whispers through comparison, but its message is about unmet desire and latent potential. Mastery doesn't mean you never feel these things. It means you decode them before they direct your behavior. Example: you feel dismissed in a meeting. Instead of passive aggression, you investigate the sensation. You realize it mirrors an old childhood pattern of not being heard. Suddenly, the feeling is no longer just about today, it's part of a larger emotional story. Now, with clarity, you can respond not to the past, but to the present moment. Maybe it's a calm correction. Maybe it's nothing at all. But it's yours to choose. Slowing the inner tempo. Emotional reaction often comes from speed. Something happens, and before we've even finished feeling it, we've already acted. We send the angry text. We interrupt. We shut down. We escape into our phone. Emotionally fluent people slow the inner tempo. They delay reaction just long enough to locate themselves inside the emotion. This practice can be trained. Here are some techniques. The 3-breath rule: when something stings, take 3 deep, deliberate breaths before you speak or act. Let the emotional wave crest and pass. Naming the state: quietly name what you're feeling in your mind. This is shame. This is anxiety. Labeling it separates you from it. It stops the fusion. Micro-reflection. Ask, what part of me is feeling this? And what would the wiser version of me say right now? The more you do this, the more you become unshakable, not because you're cold, but because your emotions no longer kidnap your intelligence. Emotional reaction is often about the past. Very often, your reaction is not about what is happening. It's about what it reminds you of. The partner who cancels on you doesn't just cause irritation, they awaken the fear of abandonment. The boss who micromanages doesn't just frustrate you, they tap into the feeling of being parented, not trusted. Emotional mastery means, I am feeling something old in response to something new, and I won't punish the present for the sins of the past. This isn't easy. It requires courage. But once you start catching it, you reclaim your life from your history. You stop being driven by old narratives. You start writing new ones. Responding is power. There is an elegance in choosing your emotional expression. Not every truth must be spoken the moment it's felt. Not every wound must be reacted to. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Watch. Let it unfold. This is not passivity. It's strategic compassion. When you respond, you stay rooted in your values, not someone else's behavior. You shape the emotional tone of the room. You give the other person a chance to show who they really are without distortion. Think of Nelson Mandela emerging from prison not with vengeance, but with calm dignity. That's not because he didn't feel rage, it's because he chose something greater. That is the level of response that changes the world. Chapter 2: Reflections that Reveal, Turning the Lens Inward. The most overlooked frontier in reading people is the self. The irony is almost painful. Many aspire to decode the emotional states of others while remaining strangers to their own inner world. But if perception is the instrument, then self-awareness is the calibration. Without clarity within, every observation becomes distorted, every interpretation colored by projection. The truest readers of people are first relentless students of themselves. This is where the mirror practice begins, not as a metaphor, but as a discipline. It is the daily act of sitting with yourself, not for comfort or affirmation, but to observe, as you would another person. What did I feel today and why? Where did my emotions surge, and where did I go numb? When did I react quickly, and what was I defending? These questions are not asked to find tidy answers. They are posed to train attention. When you journal daily, not as a dumping ground, but as a mirror, you start noticing the patterns. You see the emotional loops you return to. You hear the excuses you dress as reason. You feel the way certain people, ideas, or settings provoke responses that live deeper than thought. And with enough time, a separation emerges, not detachment, but perspective. You begin to observe your emotional landscape the way you might observe a room, where the light falls, where the shadows hide, where the walls narrow you unconsciously. That moment when you can hold your anger or anxiety or need without becoming it is when self-reading becomes transformational. But this process cannot be sporadic. It must be ritualized. There is a rhythm to emotional sharpening, and it begins with repetition. A few minutes at the end of each day, a consistent journal entry, a reflective pause before bed. These are not small habits. They are emotional conditioning. Over time, the practice forms an inner muscle, a kind of proprioception of the heart. You sense what's happening inside you even before it reaches the surface. One powerful technique is the daily triad. What did I feel today? What did I avoid feeling? What did I project onto others that might have originated within me? This triad, answered without performance, slowly deconstructs the ego's grip. You see how often you place emotional responsibility on others, blaming them for discomfort that you haven't yet faced in yourself. The practice trains honesty, but also compassion. You begin to understand the mechanisms behind your defenses. You no longer judge them, but you stop letting them lead. Reading yourself day after day builds a quiet intelligence. It's not the kind that performs well in conversation. It's not clever. It's steady, rooted, the kind that notices when your voice tightens in the middle of a compliment, when your smile hardens because you don't really agree, when your fatigue is not physical but emotional. This noticing is subtle but cumulative. It grows you. And when you begin to know your own signals, your micro-reactions, your inner resistances, you automatically become more attuned to others. Not because you've studied expressions, but because you've sat with them. You've seen how a laugh can mask fear. You've caught yourself weaponizing silence. You've watched your own shifts in tone when your confidence drops. And so, when you see these patterns in others, you don't interpret them from the outside. You recognize them from within. The mirror becomes a compass. In the beginning, the process may feel slow. You may journal and find only noise, contradictions, or rehearsed thoughts. But over time, clarity emerges, not because you force it, but because you make space for it. The mirror practice works like a still pond. It reflects only when undisturbed. The more you sit, the more you see. And what you see when you truly look is not flaw, but structure. Not shame, but architecture. You see the history behind the habits, the wounds behind the reflexes. You begin to relate to yourself as you would to another complex, feeling person, with curiosity, with accountability, and with care. There is no mastery of reading people without this. The inner world must be mapped before the outer world can be interpreted with any fidelity. Otherwise, what you see in others will always be a reflection of what you have not yet seen in yourself. The mirror is always with you, but it is in the daily act of facing it quietly, honestly, that you begin to polish your emotional vision. You read yourself not to control, but to understand. Not to fix, but to meet the self that lives beneath performance. And in that meeting, every other reading becomes clearer. Chapter 3: Integrating the Shadow, Handling Difficult Emotions Intelligently. We are taught to fear the dark emotions. Shame, anger, envy, these are the parts of ourselves we are told to quiet, control, or banish entirely. From childhood, we're praised for smiles, punished for tantrums, and ignored when we sulk. Over time, a subtle belief takes root that emotional strength means emotional control, and emotional control means emotional suppression. This is a lie, and it is one that costs us not only our peace, but our power. The truth is more difficult and more liberating. The dark emotions are not enemies of growth, they are its initiators. Each one contains energy. Each one is a signal. And each one, if understood properly, points not to weakness, but to unmet needs, violated boundaries, and parts of the self still waiting to be seen. To read people well, you must not only read their polished expressions. You must read their shadow, the aspects they try to hide, even from themselves. But you can't read anyone's shadow until you've made contact with your own. Start with shame. It is the most invisible emotion, the most corrosive, and the hardest to hold. It hides behind self-deprecation, behind perfectionism, behind a forced smile. Shame does not say, "I did something bad." It says, "I am bad." And when left unexamined, it becomes the silent architect of our lives. We avoid risks not because we fear failure, but because we believe we deserve it. We sabotage connection not because others aren't safe, but because we believe we aren't lovable. To work with shame is to gently extract the story from its hiding place. Where did it begin? Who taught you that your sensitivity was weakness? That your body was wrong? That your needs made you unworthy? The point is not to blame. The point is to trace the roots so you can separate the past from the present. When shame is named, it loses its grip. When it is examined, it becomes fuel for compassion, for clarity, for strength. Anger, on the other hand, is easier to detect but harder to handle. It rises fast. It demands. It speaks with fire. Most people either suppress it or unleash it, but both are forms of immaturity. Suppression turns anger inward, where it mutates into depression or resentment. Unleashing it without reflection burns bridges, harms relationships, and erodes self-trust. But anger, at its core, is not cruelty. It is clarity. It tells you when something is wrong. It is the body's alarm system saying, your boundary has been crossed. To use anger intelligently is to pause, to ask, what am I protecting? What feels violated? Is my response proportional, or am I carrying old fury into a new moment? Mature anger is not impulsive, it is anchored. It draws the line firmly but without drama. It says no without needing to yell. And it burns clean, leaving you more honest, not more wrecked. Then there is envy, perhaps the most misunderstood of all. It is almost always seen as pettiness, a moral failure. But envy reveals your unlived life. You don't envy things you don't care about. You envy what resonates with something in you, something possible but unexplored. The person whose confidence stings you, maybe you've muted your own voice for too long. The one whose freedom irritates you, maybe you've trapped yourself in a role you've outgrown. Envy, when used wisely, is a compass. Points to your potential. If you let it speak, not as poison, but as a whisper, it shows you where your longing lives. Integrating envy means acknowledging your desire without shame. It means saying, I want that, and then asking, what am I doing to get there? All of these emotions, shame, anger, envy, become dangerous when hidden, not because they are evil, but because what is repressed grows distorted. The shadow, left unlit, takes on a life of its own. You see it in others but fail to recognize it in yourself. You judge people for what you've disowned in your own heart. You mistake projection for perception. Integration begins the moment you stop running. When you turn toward the emotion, name it, feel it, and let it inform, not dominate you. This is not indulgence. It's mastery. You are not ruled by emotion, but you're no longer at war with it. You give it a place. You listen, and then you respond not from fear, but from wholeness. To handle difficult emotions intelligently is not to avoid darkness, but to walk into it with awareness. To hold the charge of shame, anger, and envy without collapsing into them. To mine them for wisdom. To ask not, how do I get rid of this? But, what is this trying to teach me about who I am and who I'm becoming? Emotional fluency begins here, in the places most people avoid. And once you've been honest with your own shadow, you start to see others more clearly. Not as puzzles to decode, but as fellow humans carrying burdens, hiding wounds, and expressing their pain in whatever way they've been allowed. This is the deep work, cannot be rushed, but it builds a foundation so solid that no emotion, however dark, can throw you off center. You stop fearing the parts of yourself you once ran from, and in that acceptance, a different kind of strength emerges, not loud, not performative, but steady. The kind of strength that makes you a mirror others feel safe to stand in front of. Chapter 4. Teaching and leading with emotional insight. Raising others' awareness through presence, questions, and invisible modeling. We tend to think of leadership as what we say and teaching as what we know. But the most transformative leaders and teachers rarely operate from information alone. They move from insight. They work not by transmitting knowledge, but by tuning into what others can't yet name. Emotional insight is their compass and connection is their method. To teach someone emotionally is to awaken them to parts of themselves they've left dormant. To lead with emotional intelligence is not to impress, but to invite. And the tools for this work, presence, questions, and invisible modeling, are subtle but profound. They don't shout. They resonate. They don't demand change. They make change feel inevitable. You can't raise anyone else's awareness until you've anchored in your own. And once you do, you become a mirror not of judgment, but of clarity. People don't remember what you taught them. They remember how they felt in your presence. Did they feel seen? Understood? Challenged without being shamed? Safe even when uncomfortable truths were brought to light? That's the difference between authority and influence. Authority comes from position. Influence comes from presence. Presence, the silent force of change. Presence is not charisma. It's not a charm. It's not performance. It is the quiet, grounded energy of someone who is fully here, no agenda, no mask, no need to control. It says, I'm not trying to fix you. I'm just here with you. And that is disarming. Most people are used to being analyzed, corrected, or ignored. True presence disrupts that. It slows the room down. It invites breath. It makes people feel like they can hear themselves more clearly just because you were listening. Presence is leadership without pressure. It is attention without intrusion. And in that space, people rise not because you told them to, but because they remembered who they were. Questions, the language of awareness. A good question can do what no advice ever could. It bypasses the ego. It slips past defenses. It enters gently, then expands from the inside. The best questions aren't clever. They're clean. They don't imply shame or carry hidden agendas. They are rooted in curiosity, not control. What did that moment bring up for you? What felt hard to say? What are you not giving yourself permission to want? A great question doesn't demand an answer. It gives someone space to arrive at one. And often, the first thing they say isn't the truth. It's the story. But if you're quiet and you keep the question open, the truth comes. Gently, usually wrapped in a sigh. Teaching with questions is an act of humility. It means letting go of being the expert and becoming a facilitator of someone else's wisdom. It's slow, it's nonlinear, but it's real. Invisible modeling, teaching without teaching. You can't model emotional fluency by talking about it. You model it by living it. The way you pause before reacting. The way you admit when you're wrong. The way you respond to someone's tears, not with a fix, but with presence. These are the lessons people internalize. Invisible modeling is the most powerful form of teaching because it speaks to the nervous system, not the intellect. People learn emotional safety by watching you regulate your own. They learn honesty by how you tell the truth even when it's hard. They learn humility by seeing you own your shadow without shame. You don't need to announce it. You don't need a lesson plan. You just need to be congruent. If your words, actions, and energy align, people will feel it and they'll mirror it. This is especially true when no one is watching. How you move through a room. How you handle conflict. How you listen when someone is struggling. These are all lessons even if they're never named. Leadership is mirror work. To teach and lead with emotional insight is not about being perfect. It's about being real consistently, courageously, and compassionately. It's about knowing your own patterns so well that you can see where someone else is stuck, not as a flaw, but as a familiar place. You see their shame because you've held your own. You recognize their defensiveness because you've sat with yours. You know how to meet them there, not to rescue, but to reflect. This is mirror work. You become the space where others see themselves more clearly, but only because you've done the same. And the paradox of true leadership is this: the more invisible your power, the more lasting its impact. You don't push people forward. You draw them inward. And from that place, they grow not in your image, but in their own. The work beneath the words. Presence. Questions. Modeling. These are not techniques. They are extensions of your being. You can't fake them. You embody them through practice, through inner work, through emotional maturity. To lead in this way is to become a guide, not of information, but of integration. You teach people to listen, not just to you, but to themselves. You show them how to trust their signals, how to find language for their feelings, how to own the parts they once disowned. And in that trust, something subtle shifts. They stop performing. They start revealing. And that's where real learning begins. So when people ask, how do I teach emotional intelligence? This is the answer: you become it. And when you do, your presence becomes the curriculum. Chapter 5: The Quiet Edge: How Emotionally Fluent People Shape the World. A final reflection on what it means to see clearly, to act with empathy, and to lead with understanding. There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't command attention, dominate conversations, or take up space to feel important. It listens more than it speaks. It observes before it moves. And when it acts, it does so with precision, not force. This is the quiet edge. Emotionally fluent people carry this edge. Not because they are passive or soft, but because they are deeply attuned first to themselves, then to the world around them. They don't just read people, they feel them. And not in a sentimental way. In a grounded, clear-eyed, truth-telling way. Their empathy is not weakness. It's a strategy. Their presence is not performative. It's practiced. What makes this kind of person different isn't that they never react, it's that they know when they are reacting. They catch themselves. They return. They self-correct. Not because someone else is watching, but because they are. Their emotional life isn't a mystery to them. It's a well-mapped terrain. And that inner clarity gives them an outer calm that others can feel even if they can't explain why. These are the people who change rooms without raising their voice, who de-escalate tension with a single breath, who shift dynamics simply by being aware of them. They don't overpower, they influence, quietly, consistently, unshakably, seeing without projection. To see clearly is a rare skill. Most people see through the lens of their past, through wounds, fears, hopes, assumptions. Emotionally fluent people still carry those lenses, but they know they're wearing them. They question what they see. They ask, is this true or is this familiar? That question alone changes everything. Because once you start seeing people as they are, not as who they remind you of, not as who you need them to be, not as a character in your internal drama, your interactions become radically different. More honest, more compassionate, less loaded. Clarity is a form of love. It says, I don't need you to be anything other than what you are, but I also won't pretend you're something you're not. This balance of truth and tenderness is what allows emotionally fluent people to lead without controlling, to connect without fusing, to empathize without absorbing. Empathy is precision. Empathy is often misunderstood. It's not about feeling everything. It's about feeling accurately. Precision matters. Too much empathy and you drown in other people's pain. Too little and you miss the deeper signals beneath their words. The emotionally fluent person knows how to listen without merging. They can hold another's sadness without mistaking it for their own. They can feel someone's anger without taking it personally. They track emotional currents like a sailor reads the sea, not to get lost in the waves, but to navigate them. Empathy in its truest form is not absorption. It is attunement. It allows you to speak to what others cannot say, to name what they didn't know they were feeling, and in that naming, to offer relief not by fixing, but by understanding. This is what makes emotionally fluent people magnetic. It's not charisma. It's a connection. People feel safe around them, not because they're always agreeable, but because they're deeply real. Leading from the inside out. The world is full of leaders who know how to manage others. Far fewer know how to manage themselves. True leadership begins within. It starts with emotional fluency, the ability to notice your inner state, to name it, to navigate it, and to choose your response. This kind of leadership doesn't need a title. It doesn't need a platform. It leads by presence, by modeling, by influence. Emotionally fluent leaders don't avoid conflict. They walk into it with open eyes and grounded energy. They don't shy away from feedback. They receive it, sift it, and use what's true. They don't suppress emotion. They leverage it as data, as direction, as depth. And when things fall apart as they inevitably do, they're the ones people turn to. Not because they have all the answers, but because they're not afraid to stay in the room when things get real. The ripple effect. One emotionally fluent person in a family changes the family. One emotionally fluent teacher changes the classroom. One emotionally fluent leader shifts the culture. You don't have to fix anyone. Just stop perpetuating the unconscious patterns you inherited. Just learn to feel without flooding, to speak without attacking, to see without projecting. That's enough. That's more than enough. Because emotional fluency is contagious. When people feel seen, they soften. When people feel heard, they open. When people feel safe, they become more honest. And that honesty, especially when held with care, is the beginning of transformation. The legacy of awareness. The quiet edge is not glamorous. It's not loud. It won't get you viral fame or applause, but it will give you peace. It will deepen your relationships. It will anchor you in a world that's constantly trying to pull you into reaction. And over time, this edge becomes your legacy. Not what you built, not what you achieved, but how you made people feel in your presence. What parts of themselves you helped them recover. What clarity you mirrored back to them when they were lost in fog. This is the real work. Not because it's flashy, but because it lasts. And in the end, that's the most powerful thing of all. To move through the world with emotional clarity, quiet confidence, and a presence that makes others more themselves.